Today is our last in the series that we've been doing on freedom, and the overarching theme for the month, unchained or untethered spirituality. I like the term untethered spirituality, right? To freedom that is, or spirituality that is unbound, unchained, untethered, released into its natural state. What is that spirituality within us? How do we access that space? And in doing so, we've been exploring the principle of freedom. We began the month by talking about let freedom ring, the notion that freedom simply is, and when we let it, when we allow the ringing of freedom, the vibration, the frequency of freedom to resonate in our souls, then something happens that is very moving to our spirit, and we can follow that with intuition and inspiration. We then talked about let freedom ring, and then the freedom that we're all bound together, right? None of us are free until all of us are free. And we talked about what that is, to be tied into that mutuality together. And then last week we broke down the spirituality of the wisdom of the phrase from John chapter 8, the truth will set you free. You shall know the truth, and the truth will set you free. What is the truth that sets us free, right? We did a pretty deep exhortation on the book of John, chapter 8, in that trying to understand that particular passage. So today I'm going to tell you some Taoist teachings and wisdom to kind of balance out. Last week was a lot of Bible with chapter 8 of John. So we'll try to balance that out a little bit. Every Sunday when you come, you never know what you're going to get. We pull from all the wisdom traditions. And so today we'll do a little bit more Taoist, and looking at the title today, the Tao of Freedom. Wrapping all of these themes together. What is the Tao? And the Tao is the way. Right? So what is the way of freedom? And we'll talk about that here. So freedom is something more than what we receive. It's something that we experience, right? It's more than something that we defend or fight for. But it's something that is, as we have explored in some of the other titles and focuses this month. But what we know about our spirituality in terms of untethered spirituality, right? That there's spirit of us, God, spirit, the living intelligence within us, cannot be bound. It cannot be imprisoned. It cannot be enslaved. It cannot be captured or oppressed. It can be suppressed by thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs, but there is a freedom within that spirit that ultimately can never truly be suppressed or oppressed. And it's that essence that we want to capture and allow that to become the vibrational truth of our being, not only of our being as individuals, but of all beings, because we are all connected. Amen? And so we bind ourselves, right? We experience bondage because we bind ourselves with ideas, with concepts, with beliefs, with notions of limitation and lack. We experience limitation and lack because we bind ourselves with those thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs. But part of the untethered spirituality that New Thought is to release us from those bounds, which is why I've always referred to New Thought as a personal liberation theology, right, and philosophy, that it teaches us how to become free from thoughts, attitudes, and beliefs that would otherwise hold us back, right? That's what is at the heart of our spirituality. And so we may experience imprisonment, being held captive or hostage by our own ideas of lack and limitation, but there's something inside of us that knows that that's not the truth of who we are. Right. Ernest Holmes said it would be wonderful indeed if a group of people could come to this earth and would stand for something and against nothing. And a lot is made of that phrase. I did a wonderful seminar last week online with our Diversity and Inclusion Commission with Centers for Spiritual Living, and Reverend Rafe Ellis from that. And he spent some time talking about this. It's a phrase that Ernest Holmes only said one time, in one speech, his Sermon by the Sea, his final address to our movement. But so much is made of it, and it's often taken out of context because we tend to take that phrase, to be for something and against nothing, and make it a principle that then binds us as a teaching. Right? Here's this idea of freedom, untethered spirituality, to be for something and against nothing. But then we use it to bind ourselves and say, because we believe that as a people, as a body, we can't speak out about this. We can't have a political opinion. We can't do this or that because we're supposed to be for something and against nothing. So we can't create space that offends anybody. We have to welcome all different points of views, and we end up binding ourselves to an idea that I wonder if we actually really even understand. Right? The full context of that phrase, to be for something and against nothing, says, find me one person who is liberated enough in their own soul, who could be for something and against nothing, who because they are free from the burden of their own soul. Right? That's the full context of it, to be free from the burden of your own soul. And what does it mean to be free from the burden of your own soul? To not condemn anyone because you're free from the burden of your own soul means that you have reached a state of spiritual understanding and spiritual freedom within yourself about who you are and whose you are, right? Who you are and whose you are. The context, as we were talking last week, the individual connection and also the context in which you live, right? You understand both of those things and you don't have a burden out of your own soul, and so you have no desire to condemn others. That's what he was talking about in full context there. So the Tao of freedom, the way of freedom, is gifting ourselves the ability to live freely while at the same time bringing this truth to others that may be captured, incarcerated, or have some trauma around the idea of being a prisoner of their own thinking, right? So let's break down this a little bit more. What does it mean when we're trying to acquire or experience or amplify the vibration of freedom in our life? When we look at the Taoist perspective stands as a balanced way of viewing it when compared to our Western mind and our Western sensibilities, Western way of thinking. In the Western mind and the Western sensibilities, freedom is generally understood as a state in which one can act according to one's will, without constraint or coercion. Let me say that again. Freedom is generally understood as a state in which one can act according to one's will without constraint or coercion. Right? Freedom essentially it involves two sides: the absence of constraint or coercion, right, on one side, and on the other side, the unconstrained or uncoerced individual, the one who is free. In Western terms, freedom typically means the absence of constraint or coercion. And therefore, in that understanding, any modification or regulation on the individual is seen as a limitation of one's individual freedom. And we're seeing that all over the place right now, right? You're going to force me to wear a mask. Oh, you're offending my civil liberties and my rights. When we come from the individual, when we come from a self-centered place, which focuses on the external environments and constraints and coercion impeding upon my ability to act as I choose. When we examine that way of thinking, critically, it allows us to really see, is that really freedom? Or is that in fact separation? Right? If I can act freely without constraint or coercion with no regard to what effect it might have on my neighbor, then am I free? or am I separate from? And we've been studying all month that freedom doesn't mean separate from. Freedom means my freedom is tied up in your freedom. My liberation is your liberation. We are tied in together. And so what am I really after, right? The Taoist way of thinking takes the time to examine the thinking of the individual. What is the desire, the will, the place from which one is coming from in seeking freedom? It's not a given that our will or our desire is good-natured, right? Because I might have a will or desire that says, I don't want to care about you. I just want to be separate over here. And if that's my will or desire, then I'm not really seeking freedom. I'm seeking isolation, separation. And that, of course, becomes privilege when we then say, I want to be isolated and separate, do my own thing, but I want access to all the resources, all of the, I want all the privileges pertaining thereto, as if I'm part of the community. But I don't want any responsibility for the community because that would be a constraint on my freedom. It has become a twisted form of thinking and a corroded form of freedom that we then wrap in a flag and a religion and a God and call it patriotic or call it religious, but it is neither. It is a twisted and coerced form of thinking. Are you following what I'm saying? So the Taoist way, right? The wisdom of Lao Tzu would tell us that we begin by examining our own self-motivations. What is it that we're really after? Before I get into that a little bit, just a quick story that kind of illustrates how the Taoist perspective brings a completely different approach to this conversation. Lao Tzu was, in the 6th century BC, incredibly wise individual, considered the wisest, most spiritually grounded, studied individual of the ages, and the emperor wanted Lao Tzu to serve as his moral compass within the empire, within the court system. And he sent a messenger out to him, and he said, "Please come and serve." Lao Tzu said, "I am not the one for you. I am not right for this position." He says, "Yeah, but you're the wisest person there is, and I need your wisdom to help discern right and wrong, and so please come serve." And Lao Tzu agreed to serve, but he said on one condition. He said, "I will serve for one day, and after that one day, you will see that I am the wrong person for the job." And so he goes and he serves, and a case comes to Lao Tzu, and the case is of a thief. And the thief has stolen riches and goods from one of the richest men in the community, and was caught. And so the whole case is played out before Lao Tzu, and he listens carefully to all sides. And they say, "Well, so what is your counsel?" Then Lao Tzu says, "I believe that both the thief and the rich man should spend 6 months in prison." And the rich man scoffs and says, Why should I be punished? I did nothing wrong. Why? This is completely unfair. What do you mean?" And Lao Tzu says, "It is your greed that created the condition in which the poor man needed to steal in order to feel whole. You are both equally responsible for what has occurred." And the rich man goes to the emperor and pleads his case and says, this is outrageous. This is a travesty. You got to remove this man. If he's come after me because of my wealth, he certainly will come after you. You're the emperor. You have all the wealth and power. This philosophy that he has, and the rich man even says, "I see his logic. I can even understand it. But if he has this power, there will be no stopping him, and he will come after you, the emperor." And the emperor stops and he thinks and he says, "He's right." And so he goes and he fires Lao Tzu, releases him of his position. And Lao Tzu says, I told you I was not the right man for the position. He says, your laws and your systems are corrupt and broken, and a righteous man cannot serve them righteously. You can only have corrupt people serve a corrupt system. And Lao Tzu, what he's speaking of there is not, not Marxism, not socialism, right? It's not about the money. It's about the Tao. The teaching of the Tao is about a way, and that way is a way of freedom. It's a way of liberation. It's a way of fundamentally of harmony. The Tao is a way of harmony, living in harmony. And so his point that he's making is not that the rich man should give half of his wealth to the poor man. His point is you're living out of harmony because you're living out of balance, and the entire society is out of balance. If your ability and quote unquote freedom to amass as much wealth as you want creates a condition in which others have less, then you haven't created wealth for yourself. You have created inequity for the entire society. And that will only create imbalance that will seek to rectify itself through criminal activity, right? And so the whole system is wrong. The whole system is working against you. You don't have any wealth or power or privilege because others don't have theirs. So he's not talking about, Marxist or socialism. He's talking about harmony. What is the whole system doing? So the Taoists conceive of freedom from a very opposite direction than we do in the West, right? Instead of focusing on the absence of external constraints and coercion, the Taoist focuses on modifying the self that can be in conflict with external constraints. Instead of being critical of the external environment, see what's trying to impede on my freedom, right? Instead of being critical of that external environment, the Taoist has a request and inquires that the individual be critical of themselves and to be in harmony with the environment, right? So what is the environment that's around me, and how can I be in relationship with it? And there's that major theme that you'll hear through all my sermons, right? Covenant, relationship. How am I in covenant or in relationship with the world around me? How am I moving in harmony? Ernest Holmes says that harmony is the first law of the universe. Right? There's a harmony in the universe. And am I acting in a way that is discordant, meaning disharmonious? Right? Ernest Holmes says that, one more piece on the Taoist wisdom there. It's important to understand that in the Taoist philosophy, it's not asking for people to live in self-repression. Right? Because when one lives in self-repression, one feels repressed. But the Taoist idea is to forget about the self, right? Leaving nothing to be repressed. If you're not anchored in yourself, if you're not self-centered, if you are not the subject of the sentence, then you can't feel repressed. But if you're living in harmony with the environment, then the environment is the subject of the sentence. The environment, the community is the subject, right? And the question is, am I in harmony with it? Because it is the important thing, right? So how are we in harmony with community, with each other? Ernest Holmes says, freedom is something that is won with difficulty and kept only through eternal vigilance. I would correct or edit Holmes just a little bit here and say the experience of freedom, right? Because even other places he says freedom just is, right? The first sermon of the series this month was about freedom is a principle that just is. So freedom is, and the experience of freedom is something that is won with difficulty and kept only through eternal vigilance. And what does freedom mean, he goes on to say? As it works through the only instrument that can maintain its purpose, the instrument of government. What does it mean other than the idea that all people are equal before God and that everyone is an individual in their own right, and that each should have the privilege of self-expression, provided that their desires do not infringe on the rights of others. Holmes is talking about harmony, the first law of the universe. He's talking about this Taoist idea that yes, we can have we can have individual self-expression, but that self-expression must be in balance with the world around us. You see, there are a lot of problems in our world today that are associated with this twisted Western idea of freedom. I'm sure you can think of what they are. We keep striving and demanding for the environment to give room for whatever it is that we want. We have endangered our environment and the very space in which we live so that it can produce for us our comfort. Right? We've been uncritical of our desires. We have lacked self-examination of what it is that we're really after, such that we become slaves to our own arbitrary goals and inflated appetites, because we depend so much on technologies to make our life easier. We have enlarged the list of necessities that we depend upon. And I'm speaking to you from a person who, I love technology, right? I love my smartphone and my smartwatch and Bluetooth this, but how do we live in harmony with those things? Do we have an appetite for just the next greatest thing for the sake of it? Or is there a purpose tied into that produces more harmony, freedom, and justice for everyone? That's a very difficult question to ask when we're scrolling marketplaces online. But it's one we must ask if we truly seek to live in harmony with the earth around us. I've been reading a book called The Broken Heart of America. The Broken Heart of America. And the subtitle of the book is The History of St. Louis and the Violent St. Louis and the Violent History of the United States, I believe is the subtitle. I don't have it in front of me. It's a Kindle version. The Broken Heart of America, the History of St. Louis and the Violent History of the United States. And it's a US history book, but going through the portal of St. Louis as a critical juncture in so much of American history. It's fascinating. It's just, I'm so enjoying it because one, I'm a history person. One, I love the city of St. Louis, and the perspective that it brings so much history and context of that important place and how it influenced the development of the rest of our country into perspective is just incredibly well written. Broken Heart of America, St. Louis and the Violent History of the United States. And one of the things that is in there that relates to the topic we're sharing on today is about the rhythm and the balance that was, for a very short time, lived out from the relationship between the American Indians and the white population that was settling there in St. Louis and east of St. Louis, and the fur trade industry, which was the big economic engine of the country at the time, right? The fur trade from beaver pellets. And there was a balance struck because the Indian tribes were more than willing to do the trapping, procuring the beavers for the beaver pellets in exchange for goods and payment and resources that they needed to better their communities. So there was a balance struck. We'll provide you this service. We'll create an economic system here that creates sustainability, and everybody wins. And there was this very delicate balance struck for a very long time, and everybody was happy with it until white America got greedy, and it wanted more and more profits, more and more profits, and more and more profits. And it wanted to up the production of beaver pellets for the East Coast, for New York, and up to in Chicago, and then as we expanded west to send them to San Francisco and elsewhere. And so it wanted to up the profits to such a degree that the Indians, the ones who were doing the trapping, said, this is not sustainable. You cannot procure beaver pellets at this rate. You will wipe out the population. And so we're unwilling to do that. And it was at that time that white America, Anglos, cut off their relationship with the Native Americans in relationship to that industry and said, fine, we'll do it ourselves. And so they took over and they started doing it themselves. And what did they do? They went into excess, procuring beavers at an unsustainable rate, and wiped out the population. And what happened in tandem with that is that actually the appetite for beaver pellet fur went down. The country kind of shifted, and so the economy of it went away while they went into excess and overproduction, and the whole thing collapsed. Just one example, right? Just one of many examples. There is a call to live in balance, in harmony with our environment, in harmony with our brothers and sisters, in harmony with the world around us, in harmony. Else we reap the consequences of thinking that satisfying our own egoic desires is somehow an expression of freedom, right? And so how do we find this balance? We find this balance by understanding that there is a power within us that wants us to be free, right? It's not I, but the Father within. It's the great I am. It's the as I've been saying all month, it's the I am presence that God said to Moses, who should I say sent me? Tell him the I am sent you. There is an essence within you that wants you to be free. But that essence is a universal presence. It's not your ego. It's not your desires. It's not your consumerist appetite. It is your soul, which is connected to the soul of all of humanity. And at the core of that is the desire to live in harmony with the world around you. Because as much as we would want things, Ernest Holmes says that science of mind is not a get-rich-quick scheme, right? He says this is not a you can get whatever you want at any cost kind of philosophy. And he said it would be disastrous if the world was run that way. He said, because surely some of us would want things that aren't good for us, right? So this is about praying, learning how to affirm. Monday night, tomorrow night, again, the plug for my class, Mental Equivalence, is about creating mental equivalence for what it is that we desire. And that at the root of our desire is to live in harmony with our environment, to be in balance with the earth, with all of nature, with humanity, and to allow justice, freedom, and equality to ring through our experience. And what do we find when we're willing to find freedom in this particular way, this way of freedom that says, maybe I don't need that thing. Maybe I don't need this particular, maybe I can wear a mask, right? When I go outside. What we find is that then there's a greater sense of community that is created, and everybody is lifted up, and there's greater good for everyone. It's the old story of the farmer who has award-winning corn, and the newspaper reporter comes and says, well, how is it that every year you have this blue ribbon award-winning corn at the state fair? What is your secret? And he says, I'll tell you, and he's at the end of his retirement, and he finally says, I'll tell you my secret. He says, my secret is every year I take some of the seed of my corn crop, and I give it to my neighbors to the north, and my neighbor farmers to the south, and my neighbors to the east and to the west. And the reporter is shocked. He says, you mean you give your seed, your award-winning seed, to the farmers all around you? He says, yes. He says, well, how is it then you keep winning the blue ribbons? He says, while I've been blessed with the distinction of this award-winning corn, what I know is that the trade winds do not play favorites, right? When the winds blow in the fall and in the spring and in the winter, if my neighbor has bad corn, then I will have bad corn. But if my neighbor has good corn, then I will have good corn. So it behooves us to create a community in which everyone has good corn, so that the corn gets stronger and better as a result. And that's at the heart of this idea of the Tao of freedom, the way of freedom. Our liberation is tied up with each other. This is what the great John Lewis meant, right? There he is. Oh, there he is right there. Standing in front of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which I do hope that they're successful in the campaign now to rename the bridge the John Lewis Bridge, right? This is what he meant when he said, get in good trouble, necessary trouble, right? To fight for the freedom of everyone gives more freedom away to everyone, such that the world is lifted up and we create justice for all. And we can allow that freedom to ring, as Dr. King so eloquently spoke, and let it roll down like water. This is what we're up to here in our own spirits, and here as a community, and the work that we do and what we're committed to in the world. And I'm so grateful that you are a part of it. Thank you for being with us this morning. Thank you for being a part of this community and helping that freedom ring and that Tao of freedom roll through the world, wherever you are. God bless. Peace and blessings. And so it's time for our tithes and offerings. We're so grateful for all of our contributions that come in throughout the week that are set up on automatic contribution through our text-to-tithe system, that are come in the mail, and people write and send in emails and physical letters. And so please know that we do get the mail, we do open the mail, and we love when you share with us the impact that this ministry is having in your life. This is one such individual here. You have a quote from a Sunday Experience live streamer who has told us, in a world of uncertain times, I am so grateful to know that Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta always provides me with a message of hope to remind me that everything will work out. Amen to that. Thank you to all of you who write in and let us know the impact that this ministry is having. And we want all of us to be able to experience that freedom and that message of hope. And that is made possible through your gifts and through your tithes. Remember, we are building a sustainable community here by having 200 people or more give at the level of $200 or more per month. Many of you, you know who you are, who already do that or beyond, and we're extremely grateful. That works out to about $50 per week if you give on a weekly basis. And you can set up auto tithe through the text number. You can set it up on our website, or you can simply call in or email in and let us know that you want to either adjust your pledge or your regular giving to that amount, or set up something new. Whatever works for you in these times. We understand everyone is having a different experience in these COVID days, and so we are grateful that you do what is yours to do, and together we're creating a community of sustainability. Amen. So as those contributions come in virtually, have already done so, and continue to come in this morning, let us affirm our great good together with our giving affirmation. I live in a universe of abundance. As I freely and joyfully give, I join in the divine flow, and all that I share with life returns to me multiplied. And so it is.